Christchurch, the place of Tautahi, Māori ancestor of the city and the local Ngāi tribe. With a population of around 400,000, it's the second largest urban area in New Zealand, built on the strength of its founding iwi and the spirit of early English and Scottish pioneers. But 160 years after its formation, this idyllic city will transform into a nightmare that will be etched forever in New Zealand's history.
Oh my gosh, well that shake lasted probably over a minute.
In the early hours of a September morning, the unbelievable had arrived. 60 seconds of a horrific 7.1 magnitude earthquake. And so began the journey of almost 10,000 aftershocks, many that would rattle buildings and already fractured nerves for months to come. First light, and the surreal reality of the earthquake's aftermath is revealed. It's been 80 years since the city had been hit by a significant quake, so most Christchurch residents have never experienced anything like this. Most suburbs are without power, water and sewerage. By 10:06 a.m, civil defence is on the ground cordoning off the central city as a state of emergency is declared. The first thought by many was that the quake was caused by the massive alpine fault rupturing. But seismic data soon revealed a previously unknown fault buried beneath the gravels of the Canterbury Plains. It broke the surface from just north of Rolleston to south of Darfield, and over the first 4 hours following the 4:35 a.m. quake, over 25 aftershocks were released from the fault. This home in Hororata, close to the fault, felt the full force of the initial quake and aftershocks. 16-year-old Xavier Rhodes is lucky to be alive.
Have a look down below here, actually. There's his room, the corner of his room where he fell straight down from there. The noise, the shudder, it's just like the biggest jet plane right beside you here, just ready to blow everything apart.
There was a noise before the thing started shaking. It was like the house was creaking and moaning. I could hear my dad sort of screaming, "Where are you?" from the top of the house.
And I called to him. As I kicked on the door, his front wall just exploded, just blew totally out.
Amazing the amount it hurt. I wasn't thinking anything at the time about the pain. It was sort of like adrenaline or shock almost. But yeah, it's the scariest thing I hope I have to live through, so.
In the eastern suburbs of the city, residents wake to no power, water or sewerage, and the bizarre arrival of an earthquake's aftermath, the soggy, often sewage-laden silt of liquefaction.
Our side of town that's damaged, it's everywhere. And that's the thing, driving through the water, you don't know what's underneath the water. Could be a bloody great hole, and might not be. Might be someone else laying down there, or you don't know.
Yeah, it's just freakish, isn't it?
The worst part for Jeff and Lavina is knowing that their 3 young children had to live through the terror of their home cracking and sinking around them.
It's not fair for children to have to live through this.
didn't have anything like this in our childhood.
No.
It's just too frightening.
And she's going to remember.
I feel like I just want to get them out.
Yep.
Take them to another city or another country right now. I can't just up and leave, it's not that easy.
While Jeff and Lavina's house is still standing, in stark contrast, the 150-year-old Homebush residence of one of Christchurch's founding families is in tatters. Yesterday it had housed generations of the Dean's family. Today, that legacy has been lost.
It was very hard to stand up. Bricks have caved out, and my bed head was just in front where the bricks have come down, where I was sleeping. Thank God it was dark. I mean, if you'd seen it in the daytime, it would have just been even more terrifying, I think. And the noise, as you can imagine, was just immense, with all of this building just cracking and falling down. And I gave myself two choices, either to get under the bed or to get out. So I said, right, get out.
Louise has not only lost her family's heritage, but close by the family's spiritual home, the Hororata Anglican Church, has also been badly damaged.
Make you cry.
It does make you cry.
Yeah.
Making me cry now looking at it.
Yeah.
Because it hurts.
Yeah. So it's been part of my life, all my life. 5 generations of family in the graveyard. So, yeah, it's a big thing.
I don't want to see it inside destroyed. I want to think of it like it was. It's too emotional for me at the moment. It's a bit raw. Hurts a bit.
North of Christchurch City is the town of Kalapoi, another of the hardest hit areas. Homes here have sunk and split as a result of the land slipping sideways and the devastating effects of liquefaction. The liquefaction process under the homes occurred when the water-saturated sandy soils below the water table were violently shaken. The grains of soil desperately tried to cling together, and the surrounding water rushed in to fill the spaces, causing the soil to act more like a liquid. This liquefied soil could then no longer support the homes above, and the watery silt forced its way to the surface through any crack or hole it could find. The McNeill family experienced firsthand the phenomenal forces in action during liquefaction.
It was like river rapids. It was just, and John's going, where the hell's the water coming from?
You could hear this immense amount of water going underneath the slab, underneath the scarage slab. And at that stage, we still didn't know it was the water from coming up out of the ground and going underneath the slab.
We actually felt the house actually going sideways, and that's when John said to me, we've got to get out. Our son wasn't here, he was up in Gore Bay with 3 of his friends, and so I wanted to get to him. I had visions of my son being underneath the cliff, dead at Gore Bay.
John eventually forced his way out the back door, and they all escaped down the side of the house in the pitch black.
And I just literally ran straight to here and basically went up to my neck. Even for that first day, John would get the broom to show somebody and we'd just put it in, it would just sink, 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 sink.
And it was all liquid.
And it was just water, everything was water, basically knee deep. I don't know what I thought, I don't know if I thought I was just going to keep going. I actually managed to drag myself to here and I pulled myself out. You see it, you hear about it, you watch these things on television and you never in your wildest dreams do you ever imagine.
I hope that in a year's time, that when we're sitting down watching this, that we are in a better place. And I don't mean here, I mean there, that we're in a better place. Because at the moment, it's not a good place at all, is it?
No,
it's not a good place.
It's not a good place, and I keep thinking to myself, for goodness sake, Nicki, hold it together. But you just sort of, you're floating, to put an analogy on it, you're floating with your head just above water. And all it takes is one thing and you're going to go under.
The evidence of the quake's force is scattered across the countryside, the novelty drawing hundreds of sightseers. With no loss of life, scientists like Dr. Mark Quigley are revelling in the scientific opportunities this quake has brought.
Standing on the north side of the fault here and looking across, there's all these
things that used to be straight, like the fence posts here, like the shelter belts here, like the edge of the road. That all used to go straight across there, and it used to be perfectly flat. And after the earthquake, that south side of the fault was thrust up in the air and moved to the right.
The fences and shelter belts across the Canterbury Plains become a scientist's dream, a working lab with a multitude of symmetrical paddock lines and roads to provide perfectly stationed grid lines. Grid lines that reveal this earthquake was caused primarily by strike-slip faulting, where one side of the fault has been shunted 2 metres to the right in an instant. Other sections closer to the bend in the fault have been thrust vertically up by 1.5 metres.
And documenting that is really important because it tells us not only about this rupture process, but also about other faults around New Zealand for which we weren't around to witness.
But the question on everyone's lips is how long will the fault's relentless aftershocks last?
In general, what we'd say is, the biggest aftershock we might get might be, a point, 1.1 or 1.2 points lower than that main shock. So if we got a 7.1, we might expect an aftershock as big as a 6. But, there's no rule saying that that's what's going to happen.
4 weeks ago, John McNeill lost his home in Kalapoi, and his wife Nicki fell 2 metres into a terrifying fissure of silt. The memories of that day are still raw for John's sister.
I rang Mum, and she said she was fine, and Mum was at Woody End. So I naturally thought, oh, John will be fine, and didn't ring him. Mum rang me back half an hour later crying, and she said, John's house is destroyed, and I was going, what? I couldn't believe how bad it was. And you started crying because you're thinking, my God, this is just terrible, and seeing your brother really upset.
John continues to keep up a brave face, but behind closed doors, it's been a different story.
I've said to John and Nicki a couple of times, I think they should go for counselling because of the trauma they've been through. And tough, like Nicki falling down that hole. And you actually see the claw marks of her trying to get out on the fence. Unbelievable.
And as the aftershocks continue, life gets tougher. Nicki's headed north for a break with their 2 children, while John moves them into a new rental property back in Kalapoi.
We're starting to get Nick to Nick as far as the aftershocks and bits and pieces like that. So they definitely needed a break. And Nick will come home in a week's time and we'll have it all set up. They'll just walk straight in and hopefully that's a bit of normality for them. The other people I've spoken to who are in the same boat as me, they're saying the exact same thing. It's that, just a bit of normality. So, it's bizarre. It's a horror. It's like a horror movie.
The CBD has fared much better. Most modern structures performed as they were designed, to preserve life, but not so the older brick and masonry buildings. Sections of the CBD have been cordoned off to protect the public from unsafe buildings collapsing, and there's real concern over the 105-year-old Manchester Law Courts building.
We've had reports saying in a severe aftershock she could actually come down, so they've had to block off 60 metres from the building.
When you look at the cracks in the building, especially the southern wall, it almost looks like a top third could slide off into Manchester Street, and I don't know that they got the cordon back far enough.
While a perimeter cordon around the building is there to keep the public away from any falling debris, the flip side is that a large number of businesses have been shut out while a decision about the building's fate is made. The City Council had initially proposed immediate demolition, but historic building advocates are fighting hard to have it rescued from demolition.
We are conscious that we'll be portrayed as the evil developers who knocked down the heritage building, without taking into account that we've probably got 10 others that we've restored, and we were restoring this one.
Because of its heritage status and the threat of collapse, the fate of the building is out of their control and now in the hands of the council.
Full council meeting's 9:30 Monday morning, but we don't even know what decision they're making. If they make the decision to allow demolition, that's fairly straightforward, but if they make the decision to retain the building, what actually happens then?
We can't fix it. We haven't got that sort of money. It's not viable.
Downtown in Sydenham, the large volume of older brick buildings have taken a hammering and is having a negative impact on local businesses.
A lot of people probably don't come past the street now because there's so many barricades. They can't walk the whole footpath most of the times. Yeah, so that's probably the biggest concern.
And keeping this 40-year-old family business going is tough.
We've had a couple of fires before and we've had to close down, but we've been able to pick it up. But this time it's pretty hard to pick things up, you know. Probably a low time that they had since 40 years. It's one of those things, I suppose, we can't do anything about.
The Painted Room was an inner-city niche retail store that turned people's junk into objects of beauty. Owners Bridgid and Caren are returning to have a last look before it's demolished.
I'd driven down thinking the window might be broken or, you know, things had fallen over possibly, but didn't for one second anticipate the devastation of the whole roof caving in and the window being blown out. And
I still can't believe that this has happened.
I just stood there and felt completely powerless. It was completely taken out of our hands and our beautiful shop was just destroyed.
We'll be okay. You always are. And it's a hell of a lot worse and no one got killed and all those other things. We'll be fine.
We will be fine and we'll do it
fine.
again because this is what we do.
In the eastern suburbs, the massive clean-up continues. Liquefaction silt has left an indelible mark across the neighbourhood. But this disaster has also brought out the best of Canterbury's spirit.
Our mum said that we had to come and help because our house wasn't very badly damaged.
Just from Galbraith Avenue and just helping out, that's all good, a community spirit.
Help has also come from an unlikely corner. A huge number of high school and university students have laid down their study leave and holidays to pitch in and help those in need.
Yeah, just shovel as much as you can.
University student Sam Johnson is the man behind motivating as many students as he can to get on the end of a shovel and barrow. And a secret weapon, Facebook.
A lot of Facebook groups that were created around, like, within the student community about, you know, an earthquake after party or trying to sell a T-shirt, making some money off the earthquake straight away. And my sort of reasoning, you know, I think students could do a lot better.
With the power of the social network, it hasn't taken long for word to spread and a student army of volunteers to form. On the first day of his Facebook campaign, he had over 300 students.
Because we're from Cashmere, and Cashmere wasn't really hit very bad, so we thought, you know,
help some other areas that were hit a lot worse than we are.
And Bridgid and Caren have found help has come their way too. They've been given free storage for the small amount of stock they rescued from their devastated store.
People who you least expect or you didn't even know very well, just offering help of any form, you know, whether it's grocery vouchers or space to put our stuff or whatever. It's really, really cool.
This isn't our lock-up, just total giving. It's magic.
Better still, they've had divine intervention and stumbled across some new premises.
We've got someone who's giving us somewhere to be, not just saying go in there and have it. All the prayers have been answered. I actually had a Presbyterian praying for me today. I've run out of Catholics. They've all died off on me, so I've moved to Presbyterians.
In the badly damaged eastern suburbs of Christchurch, the Pockson family have made the hard decision to move back into their damaged Bexley home.
Living in amongst a mess and boxes and cracked walls and slanting floors, it's not what I want to do. Just be waiting for answers to when we can move on.
After a short reprieve living with their parents, they've decided not to use their limited insurance rental accommodation monies until they know what's happening with the rebuild or repair of their home.
This whole situation, just things like that, is just you want to bang your head against a brick wall. But if you do, the house will probably fall down.
In the CBD, the council meeting to assess the fate of the damaged MLC building is in full swing.
We've got to look at the longer term of what this means for the heritage of Christchurch if we take this building out.
Sort of investigative work that was done in a very hurried fashion. The reports were got together quickly. They were not thorough because they couldn't be thorough enough because access to the building couldn't be done to do full radar scans of the building to make sure of its strength. And the immediate sort of reaction was just to, the simplest solution, in fact, I suppose, is just demolish it. It solves all the problems. It solves the problems of social dislocation. It solves the problem of any threat of danger. It takes the problem away. But in the process, you lose something, and you lose something that no other generation is going to see again.
Advocates are convinced the damaged brick and masonry building is reinforced with steel in the columns, ensuring it could withstand another quake, be restored, and not be an immediate risk to the public.
Now, Civic Trust has a stance that indeed the building, if all possible, should be retained. If not, then if it has to be demolished, then at least it's taken down to street level, and at least some attempt is made to try and retain the street corner focus.
Structural engineers have inspected the building and reported back to owner Richard Peebles.
The email says, aside from the minor detail illustrated above, they reiterate there is significant cracking throughout the structure. In my opinion, should another tremor exceeding 5.5 be experienced in close proximity to the building, or major parts of the building will probably collapse. Now, if that's not an immediate danger, when we've had nearly 900 quakes since the initial quake, what is the definition? When it falls down?
Is this building worth more than a human life?
Of course not. That remark was made to me that I had no regard for, did I not have any regard for human life? I knew at that point it was the end of any hope of it. It was going to turn immediately into an issue over people.
Many people would come in front of the council and say, that building's been there for 100 years, it'll be there for another 100 years. And unfortunately, what we've seen is we're not immune from the sort of seismic activity that people associate with perhaps Wellington or the middle of the Southern Alps. So we still have to plan for this happening again.
6 weeks on from the September quake, John and son Taylor are off for the night surfing. John's hoping to take his mind off his financial worries as he waits for insurers to make a decision to rebuild or repair their Kalapoi home.
What happens in 6 months, 8 months' time for us when we're paying rent and a mortgage? We'll be paying a rather high mortgage and rent, just like everyone else will be. They're all in the same. We're all in the same boat. Our toughest times might be coming.
Might be ahead of us rather than where we're at the moment. I mean, John was awake all night, weren't you, last night, basically?
Yeah, I'm worried. I'm more worried about
awake all night.
The rent. When it comes time that we are paying a mortgage and rent, who do you default? Do you default your rent or do you default your mortgage?
I think in the beginning we had that ups and downs opposite. Like any, as I keep saying, it's like the grief process. You know, you go through these stages and he'd be down and I'd be up. Or I'd be down and he'd be up. But now we've both hit that plateau that we've both been down and we haven't been able to jolly the other one along.
That's kept me awake. It's kept me awake. It's honestly kept me awake, sitting there thinking about it, on how we go about it. Right.
For now, John's going to leave the stress behind.
If we can get some waves like we got last year, be stoked. It's pumping, eh?
It's October 2010. After 6 weeks and nearly 3,000 aftershocks since September 4, the fate of a number of older historic buildings in the CBD is clear. And the battle to save the 105-year-old MLC building has been lost. The brick and masonry structure has gone from being classified a Class 1 historic building to being listed as an immediate threat to people's lives. For owner Richard Peebles, his signature building is taking her final curtain call. And while it means he and a large number of businesses in the fall zone of the building can start to move forward, it's still a bitter pill to swallow.
When I spent all night one night trying to work out how we could maybe get a hotel in there and spend the $5 million on strengthening it, but I could never work out how you'd temporarily hold it up while you did the work. And there was a lot of aftershocks, you know, it did its job, you know, it stayed up. And no one died.
rented room partners Caren and Bridgid are back in business. After setting up a small pop-up shop in the suburb of Littleton that didn't do so well, they've finally been given access to the shop they were offered weeks earlier for no charge.
Having moved here, starting to sell some pieces, it's just having that flow-on effect. It's just wonderful. So it's like that. So we can sell some pieces, we can get some more pieces reupholstered, we can introduce more stock. It's exciting.
But there's one nagging stress that doesn't seem to be going away in a hurry, and that's the ongoing aftershocks.
These aftershocks, I hate them. I absolutely hate them.
It's like the 70s up there on a 5, you know.
Up there is Brigid's Parisian-style apartment, right above the shop.
Literally feel happy. It's quite a thing.
Things are really happening, so I think that really helps as far as that stress level goes.
I think we're taking control, aren't we?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, actually. We're taking control. We feel like we are in control again.
And as the weeks roll on, Christchurch is attempting to rebuild. While water and sewerage has been restored to most of the city, some eastern suburbs are still battling along with portaloos and gritty dry silt. By mid-December, Cantabrians had endured 3,777 aftershocks.
Good job on that one.
Yeah, bye.
With the festive season fast approaching, families like Jeff and Lavina are doing their best to put on some Christmas cheer.
Turn the ferry around. There you go, look at that.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Covered up what we could with tinsel and...
Well, the
Yep.
chances are we could be still here next Christmas, so
Oh, exactly.
we have to make it positive and we have to get used to living here and we have to be happy because you can't live your life being sad and grumpy and angry all the time. It's not good for your soul. Hey, we're all right and it's not going to fall down and we just make it
Yes, quakes have stopped for the now.
what we can. Yeah, it has helped.
Haven't had one lately.
Aftershocks.
So that's quite nice.
Definitely helped.
We're not the worst off. I mean, we're living back in our house. We're back in there. There's a lot of people who aren't in their houses, can't live in their houses, and, well, geez, I feel for those guys, for sure.
I think we're still all right, aren't we?
I hope so, dear. So far, so good.
It's really promising.
So far, so good.
No, we're all right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Family's what it's all about, eh?
And Christmas Day would come and go, but a harsh 4.9 magnitude quake hits on Boxing Day and reminds everyone that what began 3 months earlier is far from over. In fact, many residents in the Port Hills and CBD felt this quake was worse than the September 7.1 magnitude quake. Scientists recorded the highest ground acceleration ever recorded in the region. High up on the Port Hills, south of the city, Dr. Mark Quigley is investigating this unusual phenomenon.
It's amazing. So there's 20, 30 centimetres of space here. This whole boulder has been picked up from here and moved around. We're a good 40 kilometres away from the fault at this stage. Makes you wonder, you know, is what we're seeing here related to that main earthquake or something else? Whoa, this is amazing. This boulder has come out of this hole here. I mean, you need to have shaking with an acceleration at least as much as gravity, if not greater, like 1G or more G, to get something this big to come out of that.
The exciting thing for Mark is this is a scientific coup. Usually this type of geological evidence occurs on isolated mountain ranges, so is seldom documented.
I've never seen anything like this in my life, not in a journal article, not in the newspaper, in this sort of an environment. It's just truly amazing.
But the intensity of the forces involved is also leading Mark to another conclusion.
What we'd want to test for is to see if we see this sort of deformation, these sort of rocks breaking and bouncing around. If we see that on all these peaks all around through here, it would seem more likely that it's probably from the big event. Whereas if it's fairly localized and it's rupturing up close to the surface, this is the sort of thing you'd expect to see, you know. Looks to me like there may be a fault passing straight through this area. Looks like we're very close to a fault.
However, it'll take time for geologists to determine exactly what's happening in the ground around these hills. Despite living through more than 4,430 aftershocks, life in Christchurch is desperately trying to return to some semblance of normality.
see this aftershock?
In the middle of a busy lunchtime, Christchurch City transforms into a surreal hell on earth.
We've just been hit by a devastating earthquake in Christchurch again. I'm one of the reporters from the press building. I was upstairs when it hit. Buildings fell down.
It was chaotic and frightening.
Breaking news reporter Olivia Carville has just escaped the wrecked press newspaper building and about to report on the biggest story of her life.
Trying to be a witness to that and not get involved, it's impossible. You know, you lose objectivity. Seeing bodies lying in the street is an image that will never leave my mind. That's something that I don't think I'll ever get over. It was a nightmare. It was like I was in a movie set, and it was a horror.
That horror is spread far and wide. The local television station building has completely collapsed. The wreckage of the PGC building is equally hard to believe. While this footage was being shot, 30-year-old senior accountant Nick Walls is trapped somewhere under tons of rubble on the first floor.
I actually felt the building go down, which would have been our floor, collapsing down onto level 1. And then it was pitch black.
And a split second later, the floor above collapsed.
The legs on one end of my desk crumbled and landed on my right side. And that's where I was pinned. Not long after the building collapsed, I could hear people, very faint noise of people outside and sirens and...
Rescuers and volunteers worked frantically to reach those still trapped. They endured nearly 150 aftershocks in the first 3 hours. Dairy farmer Rob Mackle travelled 150 kilometres to join rescue efforts, despite the relentless aftershocks.
When they happened, everyone basically froze and looked at one another and waited for possible collapse, further collapse. The building was moving like it was a big piece of jelly.
We felt all the aftershocks, and I was a bit concerned because the desk was pinned on me. I was concerned that more weight was going to end up on my hips.
And as every aftershock struck and every hour ticked by, the potential for Nick to suffer kidney failure or cardiac arrest from the pressure on his muscles increased dramatically.
As time went on, that continued pressure just got more and more and more. And by the last, for the last 2 or 3 hours that I was in there, it was quite painful, and my breathing got quite shallow and I was breathing a lot faster.
After 9 hours, they finally reached Nick's floor, only to be told time was running out.
The rescuers above us that were sort of coordinating things decided that they were going to pull us out. They didn't want guys that were able to get out to be all of a sudden trapped, so they gave us 10 minutes. Yeah. And so the pressure was on big time. We'd already worked out that Nick was a pretty big bugger.
And then they had to saw part of the desk away and saw chairs out of the way.
We'd decided that he was going to come out very uncomfortably. We got him so far, and Nick started making some noises that you wouldn't want to hear in your worst dreams.
I had no feeling in my left arm at that stage, and like quite severe pins and needles, and couldn't move the arm. It was basically dead arm, and same with my left leg.
He was in a lot of pain, yeah, a lot of pain, but he was smiling. He was very happy to be out of there.
I've realised that I've got an amazing support base, hundreds of friends, hundreds of people from all over the country and all over the world who are really concerned.
February the 25th, 2011. 3 days after the 6.3 magnitude quake ripped through the heart of Christchurch, the death toll now stands at 113. city emergency services are still working round the clock. The eastern suburbs are still literally cut off. No water, no sewerage, no power, and the feeling that there's no help. The only window into the widespread devastation for some has been through the local press newspaper, which miraculously printed and delivered a paper on the morning after the February quake. While the rest of the country and the world watched live images, it was only when the press was delivered that those worst affected saw for the first time the magnitude of the damage.
In a broken city with so many without power, they didn't know what was going on. They knew it had been a disaster of a significant level, but no concept. You know, you didn't want to drive around the city, even if you could.
While the paper revealed the extent of the disaster, it also gave hope that help was on its way.
You knew the extraordinary response of the rest of New Zealand and the rest of the world to come and help. And I think that makes a huge difference. When you're sitting in a broken home and you've got no power and you're struggling to get water, when you know that the help is pouring in, it's hugely reassuring, I think.
The initial February 22nd quake rupture took only a matter of seconds. It began 6 kilometres under the Port Hills, south of Christchurch. The initiation of the rupture sent P waves out through the gravel and rock layers at speeds of up to 8 kilometres a second. The underground crack grew, shearing up the rock layers, generating secondary waves with every crack. And just 1 kilometre from the surface, the fault stopped, releasing piled up shear waves and the most destructive and chaotic surface waves into the city. Living in the suburb of Bexley, Jeff and Lavina Pockson were hit hard after the September quake. The February quake has wreaked havoc with their home yet again. Liquefaction silt nearly half a metre deep surrounds their house.
Yeah, looking over fences and just about hitting your head on the roof. It's
just unbelievable, the amount this time. We thought we had heaps last time, but this is just a phenomenal amount of liquefaction. It's mind-boggling how much has come up out of the ground. We were really lucky, you know, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah,
the house is nothing. People are suffering so badly. I just feel for them so much.
Yes.
We are so lucky to have each other.
Not knowing what the future holds for their home and their family is heartbreaking.
It's pretty hard.
Got through it once. Went through it again.
Yeah.
In Sydenham, Bridgid and her daughter Margaret are homeless. Her apartment above their shop has been destroyed and they're living in the garage out the back.
Nothing's insured and I have no possessions. I have no home. I have not a penny in the bank. I have always done what I should. I've always worked hard. I'm a good mother. I've gone down to the level of what is my riches, and that's her sitting there. She's my riches.
Trying to grab just like family heirlooms and stuff, and just...
I've got a piece of Auntie Margaret's material. I've got an old book. I got photos of Dad. I got photos of Dad when he used to play tennis.
It kind of all makes it just come together, hit a head or something. Like, as soon as you see that one thing, that's just...
This is...
Terrified, they only grabbed what they could in their panic to get out.
I don't actually have any other pants or have any other clothes. Got to go buy socks and just menial little things that you usually always would have. You don't, but we're quite lucky.
We were going to be fine in a year. We were going to be absolutely fine in a year. And we were doing really well and we felt good. I actually, up there in that apartment, my Parisian apartment in Sydenham was the best place I've ever lived.
In this part of the city, hundreds have lost so much. Next door neighbour Dayal Ravji has lost his family-run dairy after 4 decades in the community.
It's tough on you, isn't it, sweetheart? It's tough on you.
But beneath the pain of the loss, Dale is still determined to somehow carry on.
If anything happened to me, I still come back and fight against. I got my boy there, they helped me much.
Over the Port Hills, the historic harbour township of Littleton is virtually shut off from the rest of the city. The main tunnel road connecting the port town has been closed, and only one windy, narrow road remains open. Massive rock falls have claimed 2 lives, and at first glance, it looks like every second building on the main street has been destroyed. But locals have somehow managed to muster up some water.
It's all the way from 13 College Road in Littleton, from his backyard.
The naval ship Canterbury was in port at the time of the quake, and its crew have been in response mode ever since.
We were very fortunate in the fact that when we came here, we were fully stocked, ready to go. We were just about to start an exercise, and it just happened to be that we were right place, right time, I guess.
The ship's galley has been feeding 700 a day and making sure the local kids are well looked after.
We took a whole lot of lollies out last night, and we had a bit of a lolly scramble for some of the kids, and that was certainly well received.
February the 26th, thousands of homes have been destroyed, countless are homeless. The death toll stands at 147, with over 200 people still missing, and thousands are fleeing the city. Some of those that weren't hit so hard with this last quake are still finding it tough. For Nicki McNeill, traumatic events of September 4 have come flooding back.
It's real, and it's really real that there are families out there that have lost loved ones, and that's what I thought had happened the first time around, and so my nightmares become real, and I'm really finding it hard dealing with it. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but that's what's happened.
For Dr. Mark Quigley, what began as a guilt-free science experiment after the September quake has now turned into a nightmare. His own home in Avonside has been ravaged again, and he's been left reflecting on his role as an earthquake commentator.
It's absolutely horrifying, you know, really devastating. And as a scientist, you always ask yourself when something like this happens, is there anything that we could have done? Is there anything that we could have done better? You know, and it's like, well, shit, I mean, there's not really. I mean, I'm hopeful that we've sort of relieved that elastic strain and the clock's back to zero, but how these faults interact, we're gonna learn as much as we possibly can, and hopefully we can get some idea about where the other ones are, and we can sort of model whether they're closer to their tipping point now or not. But the bottom line is, you know, unless we have some sort of incredible scientific breakthrough, then we're not going to be able to really say.
So how will this broken city and the people that live there survive, recover and rebuild their homes, their livelihoods and the city they love, knowing the earth beneath their feet can no longer be trusted?